Welcome to this episode of Mind Injection. Today we're going to talk about a conspiracy that involves the CIA, a drug from South America, and recent mass shootings. The drug we're going to be talking about that we're going to link to this is called scopolamine. Scopolamine has medical uses in surgery for preventing nausea and vomiting and motion sickness in very small doses, and they have transdermal patches for this stuff. The nefarious usages of this is reported that in South America there are hundreds of cases of people being drugged with this stuff in sort of like a date rape fashion where it zombifies the victim. So what they will do is they'll powder up this drug and either blow it in their face or put it in their drink and then issue them commands with such things as emptying their bank accounts or giving up their personal property. Basically, you become a completely compliant zombie where you have no recollection of the events that's taken place. There are some people that say it's a hoax, that don't believe in it, but the CIA MK Ultra program that was started around the 50s during the Cold War was looking for a substance that would be able to create Manchurian candidates. And many of the drugs they tested, such as LSD and scopolamine and other drugs, they were looking for something that would allow them to program someone and be able to activate them or get them to do what they wanted to do. How that's going to play into our conspiracy today is I believe that certain shooters or assassins are being drugged with these items, this drug, and sent out to do these deeds. One I would like to talk about is the assassin for Robert Kennedy, Sirhan Sirhan. Now, if you're unfamiliar, Sirhan Sirhan was an Arab Palestinian Christian born in Jerusalem, came to the United States, and on June 5th, in 1968, he came to, I believe it was a hotel, where Kennedy was campaigning and assassinated him in a kitchen walkway, in a heavy crowd at the Ambassador Hotel. Now, afterwards, during interviews, they've asked him what happened during the events, and he affirms, even to this day, the man is still alive and in prison. To this day, he affirms that he has no recollection of the event. And if you go back and listen to his account of the tale, the way he speaks lends me to believe that he's telling the truth on this. And there's something in particular he says, and he says I don't know where I pulled my gun from. Now, if someone were telling a lie, I believe that they would say, well, I don't remember taking my gun out of my pocket and shooting him. Well, the guy doesn't even remember, that he had it in his pocket. He doesn't know if he had it in his pocket or his waistband. That just seems like a little something that would, that somebody was telling a lie might slip up on that. But he had no recollection of the event, even after a time frame, a longer time frame while he was incarcerated. And he says it took him about 9 months to be able to get his memory back on things. And so I believe that Sirhan Sirhan was a Manchurian candidate that was programmed using scopolamine to carry out this act. I believe some of the more recent mass shootings we had, like the El Paso shooter at the Walmart Supercenter, I believe that that young man was targeted by some agency with a with a political agenda in mind. I believe they scouted him on the alt-right forums that he hangs out on, and figured that he would be a very good candidate for programming in a mass shooting because he has a believable backstory.
So you
And so
think
you could,
you think part of this MK Ultra is still going on, right?
yes, I believe part of the MK Ultra is still going on. MK Ultra is a verified project. There are declassified CIA documents where they were conducting experiments at a hospital, testing people with LSD. There was a man, I don't remember his name, but if you research this, they say that he had jumped out of a 13th floor uh, apartment window for some reason, committed suicide. But he was tied into the MK Ultra program, and and conspiracy theorists believe that he was killed because of what he knew or what was going on. I believe that the Kennedys were targeted. I believe it's possible if you believe that Oswald was the shooter, the primary shooter in the JFK assassination. He may have been targeted for it. Uh, there's several people there that were assassinated and killed not long after one of the remarks that JFK made about saying that he believes he's uncovered a conspiracy to enslave every man, woman, and child in the United States. Then a little over a week and a half later, he was assassinated. Marilyn Monroe, his mistress, was killed with suspicious circumstances. His older brother, a few years later, I think it was 5 years later, killed, assassinated. So I believe that scopolamine is used as part of the MK Ultra program, and it dates back to the 50s. I believe it is still ongoing, and I believe factions of one of these agencies is using it to enact their political will. Now, what their motive is, I don't know. It could be gun control, could be anything.
My
Could be to
question is,
influence.
do you don't think that the guy just did the shooting out of pure hatred? You think that he was mind washed and did it for them?
I think so. I think so. And what leads me to believe that, if you look at the aftermath photos of some of these shooters, they look like they have no idea where they are. They look very high. The kid in El Paso, when he got done with the shooting, we're talking about Patrick Crucius. He drove to an intersection and identified himself as the shooter and surrendered to the police. Why would you do that? Why would you go into a place, a Walmart, and commit a racially motivated mass shooting and then go and surrender yourself? It doesn't make any sense. There's also other telltale uh, circumstances around the shooting that doesn't make sense. If you look at the number of victims, 22 deaths and 24 injuries. If you look at what he walked in with, it was an assault rifle with a 30-round magazine, and he didn't seem to appear to have, any more extra ammunition. One of the Hispanic ladies that gave an interview, a very early interview, said that she had saw several masked men inside the Walmart doing a shooting. So, whether her testimony is credible or if she is suffering from some sort of post-trauma problem where she doesn't remember correctly or having false memories, who knows? We can't say. But the circumstances there are questionable. And if you look at the young man in the only surveillance footage that they gave was he looked high or just like he wasn't there, like something was wrong. And if you look at the mugshots for Sirhan, he looked the same way. He looked like he didn't know where he was. All these circumstances with these shooters in these high-profile, politically charged shootings, they look like they're on something. Their actions don't make any sense.
Let me
You
let
would
me ask
think
you
that if you
this.
go,
The Colorado shooter, the theater shooter, was it Holmes or something like that?
I believe so. I know who you're talking about. It was
Do you think
the
he?
premiere of that movie. Some of these I believe are just psychopaths,
I think
just
he was the
people who are.
psychopath.
Yeah, I think so. Some of them are psychopaths, and he looked like he was on something for a
Well,
while.
yeah, you had
Um,
mentioned the way that they look, and to me,
yes,
every time you see him, his eyes are just 50 miles open. I mean, they're just huge.
right. It looks like, yeah, he's got that look to him. He's got that look to him. And so you have to question some of these motives for some of these people. Now, there are politically motivated terror acts, and I believe that some people are carrying these out of their own free will. Like the Boston Marathon bombing and things like that. But some of these school shootings, some of these public place shootings, these mass shootings, the ones that are heavily covered in the media, they have very odd circumstances around them. Another odd circumstance shooting is the one that happened in Las Vegas at the country music festival, where the guy shot out of the windows of the hotel there. They covered that for about a week and a half and didn't talk any more about it. And
And
some of these
they never found a
shootings,
motive, did they?
no, that not that they've come out and talked about.
These people
Um,
that are doing the shootings, are the is the government or whoever is doing this, do they go kidnap them, or like you said, do they just find willing people on the internet and pick them up, or
I think what they're doing is targeting people because of their motivations, like their political leanings or whatever. They're finding people who are vulnerable. And if you look at how this drug is used, the scopolamine drug, if you look at how it's used, they they have girls that will come up and slip it in a person's drink, or they'll blow it in their face. Like, you can have skin contact. It can be administered transdermally. In fact, the the medical patch that they give people before surgery or for motion sickness is a transdermal patch. So it can be soaked through the skin readily,
wouldn't
and
it
that's in
be
smaller
obvious
amounts.
though for to have a cloud of dust in the air or something like that?
I think what they're doing, like with the El Paso kid, and this could be how it happened, or it could be done in another way. I mean, the options here are limitless. I think they caught this kid, followed him around, caught him, outside of his home or hanging out, snatched him up in a van, blew the stuff in his face, uh, you know, got him compliant, gave it to him, and then issued him orders, got everything ready, dropped him off, and said, "Go to it."
But I thought it said that the drug rendered you helpless.
It renders you compliant. So, one of the cases that Vice News covered was a man who had met some people at a bar, some females. He woke up at his home the next day with his apartment empty. And he comes outside and he asks his neighbor, he says, "Hey, what happened? All my stuff's missing." He goes, "Well, don't you remember? This morning you were loading all of your belongings up into a van with two other guys and a female. Like, you helped them carry everything out of your apartment." And then he later found out that his bank account had been emptied also. And so it doesn't render you helpless, it renders you compliant with amnesia. So
Gotcha.
you don't remember what happens, but you follow instructions from the people who are telling you what to do. This is a perfect drug for the MK Ultra program. Now you got to remember why they wanted this MK Ultra program. They wanted to create assassins. A Manchurian candidate is someone who would blend into society, unknown, but could be programmed to carry out an act at a certain date, certain time. That's what they wanted. But doing something like that obviously has challenges and technical difficulties. But if you could find a drug like scopolamine to just snatch a person up, with a little covert op, a small team in a van, to snatch a person up, drug them, give them the tools they need to do whatever you need them to do, and turn them loose, then the options are limitless there.
With the
And so
JFK assassination, the guy that they picked up for that, do you know if they held him for weeks training him, or if they just picked him up that day and sent him in, or
with the way it looks, they would probably pick him up that day and send him in. And I think he would have been targeted because he had already been to Russia. They knew he had already traveled to Russia. They could tie him to communism. That was the big scare tactic back then. So, in order for these things to work correctly, you have to have a good backstory. You have to have a believable, plausible backstory. How believable would it be if you just took a random kid, did well in school, had lots of friends, and then sent him to school one day to shoot the whole place up? It wouldn't make any sense. There's no motive. There's nothing believable there. If you want to push an agenda, you have to take all questionability away from the act itself and then focus on the results of the act and what you have to do uh, in the aftermath.
so does
And
this drug show up on a screening?
so the drug itself has a elimination half-life of 4.5 hours,
Wow.
which is an extremely short half-life for the body. Comparatively, marijuana is known up to 30 days, give or take, depending on body fat. Other drugs, like some of the more illicit drugs, are about 3 days. Opiates are about 3 days. This elimination half life for this drug is 4.5 hours. So that means in 4.5 hours, half of the drug that was in your body is gone. And then another 4.5 hours, half of whatever was left there is gone until the point to where it's no longer detectable. So it has an extremely fast elimination from the body. So if you can snatch a kid up, dope him up, and get him to do something, then during the night, that evening, it's no longer going to be showing up in his system. And you have to be testing for this kind of drug. Most of the tests they give people for drug tests, they pull blood and do a drug test. It's a multiple panel test that's testing for illicit drugs. Something to blame something on. Like if you were in an accident, they would say, oh, you had alcohol in your system or you had cocaine in your system. This has to be specifically tested for. So it's not on your common panel test. It would show up on like a post-mortem toxicology where they're doing gas spectrometry to see what all is in someone's system.
I was about to
But
ask, I wonder if that could have been used in Jeffrey Epstein's case.
maybe,
Drug him,
maybe,
tell him to hang himself, and he does it.
yeah, it would be the simplest. It would be much simpler, and the guards, like we talked about, had access to him. They could have, rubbed this on him, had it in a rubber glove and just rubbed it across the back of his neck.
Right,
And
and they
then
didn't check him from 10 p.m. to what, 6 a.m. or something.
6 a.m. Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah,
So, uh, let's see here if I can. I'm going to basically go over an article here from The Sun. That's a news outlet in the United Kingdom. It says, what is devil's breath? The drug is called scopolamine, but more commonly referred to as devil's breath. It's made from the seeds of the borrachero tree. It is mainly produced in Colombia, where it is used to make victims carry out sexual assaults and robberies. Devil's breath comes as a fine white powder which is blown into the victim's face or used to spike food and drinks and renders people helpless within minutes. It then disappears from the bloodstream within around 4 hours, meaning it often becomes untraceable before a victim has had time to be tested. What are the side effects of devil's breath? The odorless and tasteless drug can affect someone in moments. It has a reputation for turning people into zombies, wiping victims' memories, and enforcing a lack of free will. In high doses, it can be lethal. Victims have reported feeling drowsiness, clouded vision, incoherent speech, and even frightening hallucinations. After recovery, they claim to have no memory of what happened. So, think of all the options that the MK Ultra program could use with that kind of drug. What sort of things could they do? What sort of incidents could they cause if they had a political agenda in mind, such as gun control?
And that
or
I was about to ask you that with the gun control dilemma. When was this El Paso shooting? What was in the prime time at that time?
what happened during, I believe, gosh, I don't remember.
They
We'd have to
they
go back and look.
they hit a dead spell when nothing was going on. No shootings or anything. I mean, you had like your typical Nashville or whatever, just backyard shootings. But
Hmm.
honestly think it was the Epstein case, was it not?
I believe it was during the Epstein case. So
So it's kind
let's
of like
see.
a here's Epstein, but hey, pull your attention over this way.
Right. So on August 3rd, 2019 is when the El Paso shooting occurred. Do we remember from our last podcast
Epstein
the
was in jail at
timeline
that
on the
time.
Epstein? He
Didn't
was
he
in jail
die
at that time.
the ninth or 10th?
I believe so. You can see how some of these things can be used. Now, if you look at the kid coming into the front door of the Walmart with his his earmuffs on and his AK-47, he doesn't look very tactical. He doesn't look like a man on a mission. If you were someone that was going to plan something like this, you wouldn't just walk through the front door like you were coming in to buy a gallon of milk. So that kind of just the sight of him lends to the mindset, and the way that the child looked afterwards lended to the mindset. And if you look at the motives that they attach to the shooting, far right extremism, anti-immigration, Hispanophobia, belief in the white genocide conspiracy theory, and the Great Replacement conspiracy theory, and eco-fascism. So they vilified all these things. Now, these are things that he was linked to. I believe it was on the 8chan forums where he would hang out. And so I think that he was chosen because of his background on his beliefs on some of those things. And who knows if he even really believed it. He could just be trolling or having a good time or stuff people do, something that they're not, don't even have passion for. But nevertheless, on August 3rd, he walks into the Walmart in El Paso and murders 22 people and injures 24 others. If you look at some of these, if the listeners are out there and I'm asking you to pay attention to when these shootings happen, and if you can see the people's faces or see these individuals, pay attention to what they say after the fact. If they're claiming not guilty when obviously they're on video camera committing these crimes, if they're saying they don't remember what happened during the day, pay attention to those type of things. They exhibit the side effects of this scopolamine poison. And so I believe that the CIA or a faction of the CIA or someone with ties to the CIA or knows their motives, maybe ex-agents, or maybe even an outside force, like from another country. I believe they're using these tactics, targeting people and setting up these mass shootings for political motivation. Because you notice there was a massive uptick in them. We didn't have that many before Columbine and even after Columbine. And then all of a sudden, within the last several years, there's just been mass shooting after mass shooting after mass shooting. And immediately in the media, people are calling for gun control. And in our educational institutions, they're championing democratic socialism and things like that. And if you look at the first steps of enabling socialism in a country, you have to disarm its population so that you can't have a revolt. That's any political ideology. If you're planning to do a takeover of a country, you have to disarm its citizens. And that's why we have our Second Amendment to prevent things like that. So we have to be very careful when making our laws when it comes to these sort of things, because it'd be very simple to one day say enough is enough. We're going to ban these firearms, these weapons to prevent these things. You're not going to prevent violence. England sees that. They have stabbings, car bombings, and people crashing trucks through crowds. You're not going to stop violence. You can You can't stop a person who wants to do harm,
There
but
will
you
always
can
be
set up a
hate.
situation. There will always be hate, but you can be so afraid that you take away the rights of people to be able to defend themselves. Because the only thing that would make a very large man equal to a small elderly lady is a firearm. And if there's no firearms, then there's no equalizers. Then the strong can take from the weak, and people will not be able to defend themselves. You have to look at the all the facts surrounding these shootings and the like we said, what happened back into the assassination of the Kennedys. You have to look at what he said there uh, before his death, that he was going to uncover a plot to enslave every man, woman, and child in the country. And he was a Democrat. And then less than a week and a half later, after he made that statement, he was killed. And then Marilyn Monroe, who he had confided in, came up dead with suspicious circumstances. If you're listening, go research who was present in the last few days of Marilyn's death and who she talked to on the telephone. Look at what Robert Kennedy was planning to do when he was assassinated. Look at his campaign promises. Listen to what JFK said he was going to do. Look at the MK Ultra program and look at false flag operations. Do your research on, and whenever there's a shooting, look closely at these children or any other massive terror attack. Look closely at the people who are committing these and see if they do not look like they were under the influence of something to you. Apply the research that you can do on this drug to this situation and see if it's plausible. There are psychopaths out there that commit horrible crimes, but there are also factions out there that are looking to have false flag operations and control legislation and control the outcomes of politics through these events, such as the Bay of Pigs to cover the invasion of Cuba. So it does happen. MK Ultra is real. The papers are out there. They've been released. So pay attention to what happens in the country. And that'll conclude this episode of Mind Injection.